For years, I thought I knew how to use a bandsaw, but with time and experience, I realized that I was just using it to hack out rough shapes. I'd cut close to my lines, but not too close, and then I'd use a sander to clean everything up. That's extra work, extra dust, extra hassle. Everything really changed for me when I learned to steer with the back of the blade. That's what I'm doing here. I'm cutting right on my line, not next to it. I'm not afraid of crossing it. My cut is nice and straight without offense. And here I'm cutting a curve. Again, right on my line with near perfect accuracy. I'm able to do it because I'm not steering the cut with the teeth on the front of the blade. I'm using the back of the blade. This is a technique that I've seen a couple times in other videos, but few people seem to know about this. And I think that's tragic because it is so game-changing. It really will change how you use your bandsaw. Your cuts will be smoother, you won't be doing a ton of sanding up to your lines anymore, and you'll find yourself just using your saw a lot more often and getting better results. And it's not difficult. I'll teach you. The principle is simple. The kerf cut by the blade in the wood is wider than the blade is thick. You can see how I'm able to move the blade inside this kerf. This is true with any blade on any bandsaw because of the set of the teeth. Each tooth is bent very slightly to one side. It alternates from left to right all the way down the blade. So this causes the front of the blade to act as if it's thicker than it really is, and it cuts a wider kerf to match. That extra room left for the back of the blade is what makes it possible to steer a cut by turning the blade to one side or another. But you can also use this feature to your advantage to make perfectly straight cuts or to follow curves more easily. Watch again from behind as I rip a strip from this workpiece. Note how I'm keeping the back of the blade against one side of the kerf. It's just touching it lightly, but that makes all the difference. I'm essentially using the edge of the kerf as a fence to guide my blade. Now you might say this makes the cut self-guiding to some extent. I do have to steer a bit more at the start, but once I get the full width of my blade within the kerf, I've then established a bit of a straight edge for the back of my blade to ride against. As the cut progresses and that kerf grows longer, the fence-like edge does too, and it continues right through the cut. Technically, this works no matter which side of the kerf you bias toward, but I always like to use my line side of the kerf as the guide for the back of my blade. Now, you might be wondering, if I'm twisting the blade a little bit to turn the back of it against one side of the kerf, why isn't the cut turning as well? How am I cutting a straight line instead of a curve? Well, it's because I'm not twisting very hard. I'm just touching the back of the blade on the edge. If I do twist more, I can turn the cut. Here's some gradual curves, such as you might cut for chair legs and other common parts of furniture. I'm turning the workpiece a bit more because I'm no longer cutting along a straight line, but I'm still letting the side of the kerf steady and guide the back of my blade. And because of that, I'm able to follow my line much more accurately. I'm serious, try this out. It makes a world of difference. It's partly a matter of feel, but mostly this is just a matter of watching the back of the blade with your eyes instead of fixating on the front. That doesn't mean I'm not aware of where the front of the blade is going. I keep glancing at it, but my focus is on the back. That's the trick. Now, a couple of points to keep in mind as you try this. First, the wider the blade is, the easier this will be. This is true with any cuts. Wider blades are always easier to control. I'm using a 3/4 inch wide blade, but it works perfectly well with 1/2 inch or 3/8 too. It is a little bit more difficult with a 1/4 inch blade, but still doable. Also, the thickness of the wood doesn't matter. I'm just using some hardboard here because I had some scraps handy. The same technique will work with thick materials. Finally, you should have a well-tuned saw. It doesn't have to be a fancy one like mine, but the guide should be properly set and the blade should be tracking where it's supposed to on the wheel. I have a separate video about tuning up your bandsaw that I'll link to below. A well-tuned bandsaw is going to be much easier to control in any situation. Now, this particular saw is a new one to my shop. It's very similar to my older 15-inch Harvey, except this version has a nickel-plated table and trunnions underneath, which not only looks amazing, but the nickel is 4 times harder than cast steel, which protects the table from scratches and other wear, and it protects it from rust. I could set a cold drink on my table without freaking out. My table saw has a nickel-plated top and internal components as well. It's not a critical feature, but it sure is nice to have. I'll talk more about it in a future Cool Tools video. Speaking of cool tools, I've used a lot of featherboards over the years, but the Bow Feather Pro has really caught my attention. The fingers easily bend in the feed direction. That produces just the right amount of pressure for a smooth and even feed rate. But should something go wrong and the saw decides to kick that board back at you, the unique curved shape at the top of the fingers, combined with that living hinge at the base, produces a cam-like action that greatly increases the pressure and virtually locks the board in place. The manufacturer claims 5 times greater pull resistance than a standard featherboard, but I think it's more than that. It's really a unique design that honestly has changed my attitude about how useful featherboards actually are as anti-kickback devices. Maybe you should get just one of them so you can try it for yourself. I'm sure you're going to agree that it is the smoothest and potentially safest featherboard you've ever used. And they come from a small family business that's run by 2 brothers who came up with this great idea in their garage, and they've built a business around it. I love supporting things like that. So I'll link to them below this video.